On the evening of September 17th, 2024, somewhere near the summit of an 11,372-foot mountain in the most remote corner of Yellowstone National Park, a 22-year-old man took out a pen and signed the summit register. His hands were shaking. His fingers were frozen. He'd just climbed through fog, sleet, and hail to stand on the highest point in Yellowstone, completely alone. And the words he left behind would become the last anyone would ever hear from him. His full name was Austin King Henke. He was 22 years old, born and raised in Winona, Minnesota, a small river town tucked into the bluffs of the upper Mississippi. By every account, Austin was the kind of person Yellowstone seems to attract. Restless, curious, a little reckless in the way that young people who love the outdoors tend to be. He'd taken a summer job working for Xanterra, the company that runs the lodges and concessions inside Yellowstone, and by September 2024, he'd been living and working in the park for several months. That summer, between shifts, Austin had been planning something ambitious. A solo, 7-day backcountry trip into the most remote part of the entire park, the wild, mountainous southeast corner, far from any road, any boardwalk, any tourist. His goal was to summit Eagle Peak. If you've never heard of Eagle Peak, that's not an accident. It is the highest point in Yellowstone National Park, 11,372 feet. And it is one of the least visited summits in the entire national park system. It is so far from anything that the standard way to even approach it is by boat across Yellowstone Lake. Austin had a plan. A friend would drop him off by boat at the southeast arm of Yellowstone Lake on September 14th. He'd hike inland, set up a backcountry camp, climb the peak, and meet the same boat for pickup on September 20th. 6 days, solo, in a place where the nearest help was hours, sometimes days, away. He set off into the wilderness on schedule. To understand what happened next, you have to understand the mountain. Eagle Peak is not a hike. It is a climb. It sits at the southern end of the Absaroka Range, a wall of jagged volcanic rock that forms Yellowstone's eastern boundary. The mountain itself is ringed by cliff bands, sheer drops that searchers would later describe as rings of cliffs around it. There are no marked trails to the summit, no fixed ropes, no rangers stationed nearby. The closest patrol cabin is miles away, and cell service is essentially non-existent, except, oddly, on the very top of the peak itself. In a typical year, only a handful of people attempt Eagle Peak. Many turn back. The mountain is famous within the small community of Yellowstone backcountry climbers for being deceptively dangerous, the kind of place where a wrong step on loose rock or a sudden weather change can end you in seconds. And in mid-September of 2024, the weather was about to change. Austin made it to his base camp at the foot of the mountain. We know this because searchers would later find some of his belongings there. From that camp, he set off for the summit alone, most likely on the morning of September 17th. Somewhere along the way, the storm hit. We know what happened next because Austin himself told us. When he reached the summit of Eagle Peak that evening, the conditions were brutal. Fog so thick he couldn't see clearly. Rain, sleet, hail driven sideways by relentless wind. He was at over 11,000 feet, exhausted, his fingers going numb, and he was completely alone in one of the most remote places in the lower 48 states. But he had made it. And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. He got cell service. Austin called his parents. He called his friends. He told them where he was. He described the storm. He told them he had reached the top of the highest mountain in Yellowstone. And then he did something climbers have done for over a century. He found the summit register, a small, weatherproof container holding a notebook where every climber who reaches the top signs their name. He took out a pen. His handwriting was shaky from the cold. He wrote that he had, in his own words, free soloed too many cliffs to get here. Free soloing means climbing without ropes, without protection, just hands and feet on bare rock, with thousands of feet of air below you. He had done it again and again to reach this summit. And then he wrote this: "I am 22 years old and will never forget today the rest of my life. Life is beautiful. Go out and live it. Austin King." He closed the register. He started his descent, and no one has heard from him since. 3 days later, on the afternoon of September 20th, 2024, a boat pulled up to the southeast arm of Yellowstone Lake at the prearranged time and place. The pilot waited, and waited, and waited. Austin King never came out of the woods. When he didn't appear, the boat operator radioed it in. By Saturday, September 21st, the Yellowstone Interagency Communication Center had launched a full search and rescue operation. At first, it was treated as a likely overdue hiker. Someone slowed by weather, maybe injured, but probably still alive. That hope didn't last long. Searchers reached Austin's base camp and found his belongings still there. Some of his gear. Items he would have needed to descend safely. Half a day's hike from the base of Eagle Peak, and no Austin. The search escalated immediately. Over the next 11 days, what unfolded near Eagle Peak became one of the largest search and rescue operations in recent Yellowstone history. More than 100 personnel were deployed. 2 helicopters, one from Yellowstone, one from Teton County, Wyoming, flew the area whenever the weather allowed. Search dog teams worked the slopes. Ground crews with spotting scopes scanned the cliff bands. Trackers studied the terrain. A drone surveyed sections too dangerous to reach on foot. The numbers are staggering. Search teams covered more than 3,225 miles by air and ground. They worked at elevations ranging from 8,400 feet all the way up to 11,350 feet, almost the very top of the peak Austin had stood on. They pushed through 6-foot snowdrifts that had piled up on Eagle Peak after the storm Austin had climbed through. And in 11 days of searching, with all of those resources, they found nothing. No body, no clothing, no equipment beyond what had been left at base camp. No sign that Austin King had ever come back down. On October 2nd, 2024, the National Park Service made a painful announcement. The operation was being scaled back. They were transitioning from rescue to recovery. There is one more piece of this mystery, and it's the strangest one. When investigators looked at Austin's phone records, they confirmed the calls he had made from the summit on the evening of September 17th. But they also looked deeper. NPS staff brought in cellular forensics experts to examine every ping, every signal, every trace of digital activity from his phone in those final hours. The park has never publicly released exactly what those experts found. We know the cellular data was being analyzed. We know it was considered important enough to bring in specialists. And we know that whatever it showed, it has not yet led searchers to Austin. That last detail is what keeps people awake at night. Somewhere on or below the summit of Eagle Peak, a 22-year-old man with a fully functioning cell phone made a series of calls, and then went silent. Not gradually, not over hours of declining battery. Silent. When the official search ended, Austin's father, Brian King Henke, did something that almost no parent in this position has the strength to do. He kept going. Brian organized his own search effort. He drove down from Minnesota. He recruited volunteers from Montana and Wyoming, including experienced backcountry climbers who were willing to attempt Eagle Peak in October snow. One of them, Roger Roots, made the climb solo in mid-October 2024 and reported back the same answer everyone had gotten: nothing. In 2025, Brian announced he was going to do it all over again. In his own words, "All I want to be able to do is say as a dad, I did everything I could to give the best chance of finding him." And so, Somewhere in the most remote corner of Yellowstone National Park, the highest peak still holds its secret. Austin King's last words to the world, written in shaky handwriting in a tin box at over 11,000 feet, sit there, waiting for the next climber to find them. Life is beautiful. Go out and live it. If you have any information about Austin's disappearance, the Yellowstone Interagency Communication Center can be reached at 307-3442-643. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. This has been National Park Mysteries.